Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to my channel. Today I want to present to you some new content, 10 more Let's Not Meet stories. I know I've been gone for a while, but I promise you I am back now, and I'll be providing Let's Not Meet stories as well as a plethora of other content. I've been setting up this studio, which isn't even done yet, but once it is, expect more content involving the more realistic murder mysteries of the world today. With that being said, you guys came here for some Let's Not Meet, and I'm gonna give that to you. Two narrators are guest starring today, Mr.BlueSpooky and the Midnight Sweeper, as well as myself. I'm also gonna be narrating an extra creepypasta at the end, so stay tuned if you want to hear that. With this being said, sit back, relax, and turn the lights down. I'm your host, That Creepy Reading, and I want to say welcome to the dungeon. That being said, let's begin.
It Wasn't Dad by Scowling Owl. This didn't happen to me. However, I did witness this incident, and it still creeps me out to this day. Back in junior high school, there was this popular kid named Ryan that used to bully me, and tons of other people in the school. Ryan was the type of kid that thought he was the best in the world because he was the captain of the football team. The kid that bullied nerds and cheated on his girlfriends. You know the type. Ryan's father ran an automotive parts store. His specialty was in paint jobs and window tinting. He had many vehicles, but his favorite was a dark blue truck with orange and yellow flames on the front. It also had tinted windows and spinning hubcaps on the wheels. Ryan's father often wore the same team jersey as his son's team jersey, a red and white hat and blue jeans. As you continue reading, you'll soon discover why the details of this particular truck, as well as its owner, are very important. One day, on my way to my next class, I fell down the stairs and sprained my ankle. I ended up limping to the nurse's office and calling my dad to come pick me up. After that, I sat in the waiting room area, looking out for my dad's car. About 5 minutes after I left the nurse's office, Ryan walked into the waiting area and sat down. Bored out of his mind, Ryan decided to talk to me while we were waiting for our dads to pick us up. I guess he felt safe talking to a nerd since his friends weren't around, so I begrudgingly decided to be polite with him and made small talk. About 5 or so minutes later, Ryan looked out the glass doors and saw his father's truck pulling into the entrance of the school. Ryan said, "See you later, man," picked up his backpack and headed towards the glass doors. He was about to push the door open, and he suddenly stopped and paused. When I asked him what was wrong, Ryan explained to me that his father usually picked him up later, and that he usually parked his truck right next to the glass doors. Instead, Ryan's dad was 20 minutes early. The truck was next to the flagpoles, which were much further away, and the hubcaps appeared to be different and didn't even spin. After a few minutes of this, Ryan's cell phone went off. Ryan, at this point, simply assumed that it was his dad calling and didn't pick up, so he walked out the door and headed towards the truck. I decided to take a nap while I waited for my own dad to pick me up. Suddenly, I heard what sounded like an older man yelling and Ryan screaming. I looked out the window only to see Ryan flailing his arms and an older man trying to pull him into the truck. Because of my ankle, I couldn't run to Ryan's aid, so I shouted to the nurse as well as some other staff members to get help. One of the nurses immediately called the police. A couple of secretaries ran towards the truck to help Ryan. Upon seeing the secretaries running towards him, the creep shoved Ryan away and climbed further into his truck. The guy then sped off and disappeared into the intersection that led into a nearby highway. Ryan, at this point, was crying in pain, mainly because the guy had pepper sprayed him. The secretaries helped poor Ryan to his feet and guided him to the nurse's office. About a few minutes later, the police, along with Ryan's real father, arrived. The police, as well as an ambulance, tended to Ryan, while a couple of officers interviewed me and the other witnesses. Because I was the only student that witnessed this, the police, as well as Ryan's dad, asked me to stay in touch and hang out with Ryan, just so that he could have a shoulder to lean on and recover emotionally. So I swallowed my pride and gave Ryan my phone number. From that day forward, Ryan was a completely different person. The same person who used to body slam me into lockers was now in constant fear and used my body as a shield instead of a punching bag. There wasn't a day at school where Ryan wasn't around me. He was especially clingy and paranoid when it came to having his dad pick him up. I would have to hold his hand and stay there with him until his dad came around. It even got to the point that Ryan would call me every night to vent his fears, as well as update me on what the police would find. And many of the details about this were very, very creepy. For instance, the creep, whoever he was, not only knew where Ryan went to school and where he got picked up, he even knew which vehicle Ryan's dad drove whenever he picked his son up from school, so he decided to imitate everything about Ryan's father. And that's right. The creep actually went through the trouble of painting his own truck the same colors as the father's, just to fool and lure Ryan. He even dressed up like Ryan's dad. Ryan even said to me that the disguise was so convincing that it wasn't until he looked the creep in the eye that he realized he wasn't his father. Yet, things got even creepier the more Ryan told me, and the more the police department found. As it turns out, the creep also knew Ryan's cell phone number, but wasn't the one who called Ryan. Ryan told me that the police said that the mysterious number belonged to a payphone in a nearby gas station, so the creep in the truck couldn't have possibly called Ryan, meaning that not one, but two people may have been involved in this. Despite having video surveillance, a license plate, and the description of the driver, the police never found the guy, or his gas station buddy, even when the creep continued to terrorize Ryan and his dad. About 3 months after the truck incident, Ryan called me in the middle of the night, this time in hysterics. Someone had thrown several Molotov cocktails at Ryan's house. A couple of them even hit and shattered a window, and set part of his house on fire. Was the creep a disgruntled parent or relative of a student that Ryan had bullied? Was he the enraged parent or relative of one of Ryan's many girlfriends? Was he parent of a rival team member? Was he a dissatisfied customer of Ryan's father? Or was he just some random creep that liked to terrorize teenage boys? The possibility as to who this guy was, and why he, as well as his accomplice, would target Ryan were endless. With Ryan now gone, I quickly found myself getting very frightened of the possibility of the same creep going after me. For a long time, I was super paranoid about him going after me, and subjecting me to even worse terror than Ryan had experienced. From that day forward, I refused to be picked up from school, no matter how sick or hurt I was, because I feared that some creep was going to do the same thing to me. Even to this day, the whole incident sends shivers down my spine.
Man in the Woods by Theater Cat. Back in the summer of 2012, when I was 11, I spent a night at my best friend Anna's house, and we were there pretty regularly. She lived in a very wooded area, so her entire backyard could be considered a forest. We loved playing in it, and I practically never went inside when I was at her house. Because her entire backyard consisted of trees, there were many places to put things and do stuff and all that shit. Like a trampoline, for instance. So they had to place it pretty far back in a small clearing. We were very naive kids, and we believed that nothing could happen to us in the woods. We were so sure that we played in it all the time, even at night. One night in particular, we decided to go play on the trampoline in the clearing. The trampoline was very old, and I was very surprised it could still hold people. It didn't have a net either, which I hated because I feared I would go flying off one day without anything to catch me. We took our shoes off, climbed onto the trampoline. Something about jumping in the dark was exhilarating. I was having a blast, but as we continued to jump, the atmosphere changed. I couldn't tell what it was, but the woods seemed darker and more intimidating than before. Anna stopped jumping and completely froze, staring off into a specific spot in the woods. I stopped to look at her. "There is a person," she whispered, pointing out to the direction she was looking at. My eyes widened and I turned my head to go look for myself. Sure enough, there stood a tall, shadowy figure of a man. He noticed us looking at him and tried to slightly hide himself behind one of the thick trees. However, from our perspective, he was still visible and absolutely terrifying. We both stood, frozen, unable to yell or run. We just stared at him. He was a bit further back, but we could see every movement he made. He slowly moved from behind a tree. My eyes moved to his hand and I could tell that he was holding something. I had no idea what it was, but it made the entire situation much more freaky. Anna's senses finally kicked in and she pushed me to move, screaming for her mom. I flew off the trampoline, making one big leap and landing hard on the ground. I was once thankful that there wasn't a net on that trampoline. Anna began to run, and I looked back first. The man had begun running after us as well, and he was fairly fast. I screamed like I had never screamed before, and I took off for her house too. I felt like hours had passed before he reached her back porch. We threw herself into her living room, where we would actually be laughing from the hysteria. But the fear I felt in my stomach was sickening. Her mother, after hearing what happened, stomped onto the back porch and looked into the backyard, but she couldn't see anything. It was too dark. But she yelled at him to get away while they still could. I'm happy we never saw that guy again. Of course, going around the woods at night was never going to happen again either. And I hope that I never have to experience another encounter like that, as long as I live. So, creepy man of the woods, let's not meet again.
He Wanted to Buy Me Flowers by Scarf Week. This happened a few months ago, and has made me extra vigilant while walking home at night. I've lived in the same neighborhood in Brooklyn for several years now, and this was the first real problem I've had. The area is still becoming more popular with students, but it is still fairly quiet and kind of far out there. Up until this, I've always felt safe walking home and even going out for long runs alone. One Friday after work, I met up with a friend I hadn't seen in a while. She had been busy with her first year of law school, and I had just wrapped up my last year of grad school. I go out fairly rarely, so I was excited to hit up a few bars and go dancing with her. The evening had been a lot of fun, but around 1:30, I was exhausted and ready to go home. We had met up with some of her friends, so I said goodbye to them and caught a cab. Now, I normally use Lyft or Uber because cabs are terrible at finding my apartment. I usually end up using Google Maps and giving step-by-step instructions, which is frustrating for everyone. At the time, though, I was really tired and didn't want to wait and deal with surge pricing. Naturally, the cab driver gets lost, and I'm frustrated and ready to go to bed. After several wrong turns, he ends up within 5 blocks of my apartment building, and he is being a total dick. So I ask him just to let me off and I'll walk. This was a major mistake on my part. My neighborhood is completely dead at this time of night, so I think better of using my headphones. I am only 5'2", so I am very aware of how non-threatening I seem. After about a block, I notice a man is walking behind me. I take a deep breath and assure myself that he's just coming home late. I had just passed the subway station and walking the same way I am. Then he calls out to me. I keep walking, staring straight ahead, but he quickly catches up to me. "Hey beautiful, how are you?" At this point, a few things are running through my head. 1, my turn is coming up and I do not want him to see where I live. 2, every store within 3 blocks is closed and I'm alone. And 3, I can't tell if it's safer to play along or risk pissing him off. I'm not originally from the city, and I'm a pretty naturally friendly person. I decide that I really don't want to make him angry, so I make a little small talk while politely insisting that I'm in a hurry and need to get home, and my friend is waiting for me. At this point, I've passed my turn. My block is really quiet and empty late at night, with a condemned house and a vacant lot before you get to my building. There is no way in hell I'm walking down there with this guy tailing me. He's becoming more aggressive, leaning in closer to me and asking if I have a boyfriend. I tell him that yes, I do, and I really have to be going. Suddenly, he reaches out to put his arm around me. You're my girlfriend now, and I'll take care of you. Ugh! I'm totally alone, several blocks from my building. All these stores near me are closed, and this creep is now trying to touch me. I gave a nervous laugh and shifted away from him. Haha, sorry, I have a boyfriend. I really have to go. I'm feeling like a total wimp, being polite to this creepy man, but I'm freaking out at the thought of what might happen if I piss him off. He reaches out again and puts his arm around my waist. My beautiful girlfriend, let me take you out tonight. Now, I'm pretty sure I'm about to meet my demise, and now I'm totally paralyzed with fear. We keep walking down the block, with him wrapping his arms around me and now trying to touch my hair. Crossing the street, we pass this bodega that is open, but he has this grip on me and is going on about how much he wants to kiss me. Come on, baby, just give me a kiss. I'm turning my head away from him, seriously disgusted. Suddenly, he notices that flowers are on display in front of the store. You are my girlfriend now. I'm gonna buy you flowers. That seemed totally bizarre to me, and I'm sort of in disbelief that this obviously unhinged man wants to buy me flowers, but I realize this is my last chance. Great idea, I yell. Yes, please, buy me flowers. I'm gonna go use the bathroom inside. He walks behind me into the store, obviously to keep an eye on me, also probably because most bodegas don't have public bathrooms. The person running the shop isn't behind the counter, and I'm freaking out. My guy turns around to look at the flowers, satisfied, I guess, that I'm not going to be able to sneak out. I realize this is my last shot to get out of this situation, and I have no idea if I should wait for the cashier to come back. Will he even help me? What am I gonna say within earshot of this creeper? I had put my phone in my bag upon exiting the cab to not draw attention to myself, and now I know I can't call someone fast enough. I make the snap decision to run like my life depends on it. I'm actually a runner, but I was wearing my high heels from work, so I wasn't sure I would be able to outrun the guy. But I'm full of adrenaline and scared crapless, so I take off the front door out of the bodega, past the man who is now holding flowers, looking shocked and reaching out his arm to grab me. I sprint down the street, running as fast as I can to find something else that is open, knowing there is a bar about 7 blocks away, if I can even make it that far. I see a bodega on the other side of the street coming up that looks like it's open. I take one quick glance behind me and, yep, he is totally following me with those stupid flowers. I frantically cross the street, throwing the door open to the bodega and screaming, "A man is following me, someone please help me." The bored-looking cashier looks at me like I have 3 heads, but 2 men in their 30s immediately come over. "Honey, do you live around here? Do you need us to walk you home?" I explain where I live and ask if they could please walk me back to my building. We look out the door, but there is no sign of the man following me. One of the men says he lives a few blocks from me and introduces me to his boyfriend. They walk on either side of me and try to calm me down by chatting with me. It was so unbelievably sweet, and I couldn't believe how lucky I was that they were willing to help, especially since I'm sure I looked completely insane and was now shaking violently. I got home safely, although I was pretty freaked out. I wasn't sure if I should report it since I didn't have a great description of the man. About 2 weeks later, however, I glanced at one of those NYPD posters in the subway that ask for tips about local crime. The image was very fuzzy and only showed a man's back. The header read, "Wanted, attempted rape," and gave details of an incident that happened only a few blocks from where I sleep at night. I have no idea if it was the same guy, but you better believe I called and left a tip about what happened to me. I'd love to buy a round of beers for that couple, and I hope I run into them again. But as for my boyfriend, let's not meet.
Hoodie Guy in the Woods by X Flickers. I don't usually remember him, but when I do, I end up crying and shaking. I was just reading, thinking if anything really interesting had happened to share, when he suddenly came to my mind again. When I was a kid, somewhere between 7 or 10 years old, I used to go visit my cousins a lot when they came. As my uncle had died several years before, they had to move really far away with my aunt's family, so when they came to visit, they stayed at my family friend's house. They lived in a small town at the north, in a 2-floor home surrounded by the woods and their crops. My older cousin, who was only a few months older, and I were very close. Therefore, we usually went together in the woods alone to play. We used to pretend we were witches and we had to make potions or something like that. So we spent hours around the woods looking for rare plants or flowers, which we would gather and mix in the crops of the house. Hidden because we usually stole vegetables and eggs too. That day though, we went too far away looking for what my cousin called the best weapon ever. She talked about pomegranates that we took from a tree which we climbed. Doing that took a stupidly big amount of time, so the sky started to turn dark while we were out. We knew our dog was close and we felt safe, so we didn't really bother about it getting dark. He was a big guy who protected us from anything, barking and biting. The thing is that when we finished, we could barely see a few feet ahead. My cousin doesn't remember exactly what happened, but even today she still dreams about how I looked at her, horrified, and the dog ran away without us. We were heading home, pretty close to the fences of the crops, when we both heard some crackling sound behind us. My cousin looked the other way, disoriented, trying to find the noise and grabbing a stick. The dog pulled down his tail, which I had never seen him do before, and hid behind us. Then I saw what I thought for so many years was a ghost. He was small for being a man, but had a pretty wide back. He had a slender silhouette and wore a black hood and dark blue jeans. But what horrified me the most was his face, covered with a baklava so dark that he seemed eyeless. He was static, in a weird squat position, just staring at us between the bushes. When I saw him, he started to stare at me deeply. I could feel his eyes tearing my body apart, so cold and strong. His look hurt. I spent a few seconds quiet, with my mouth half opened and trying to communicate with my cousin. Then, the dog ran away, which made my cousin turn back to me. I told her what I saw, looking at her with tears in my eyes and grabbing her hand. When we looked back, he wasn't there, and as I used to have night terrors and hallucinations, she didn't really believe he was real. Regardless, we ran away to the house. When we arrived, we were home alone with the son of the friends of our parents. They had gone out for dinner. I was so scared they decided to take me to the second floor and tell me they'd protect me from what I saw. I started to look through the window, telling them that I wanted to make sure the bad man didn't follow us. But he did. We all saw a silhouette in the woods, closer to the fence, staring out the window. I felt the biggest shiver I've ever felt, and started to cry, shaking and almost peeing myself from fear. When our parents came home, he had left, and we decided not to tell them anything. We decided to think it was just a suggestion, a term my mother used for almost everything creepy I saw as a kid due to my hallucinations, and try to forget. When I was in the car going back home, I spent the whole way looking through the window scared. Since that, I had nightmares about the look he gave me for a few months, forgetting the whole deal after. When I was around 16, I started to remember him again, dreaming about him so much I even started drawing his face in school. Anytime I remembered him, I would shiver and my hands would start shaking, so I even avoided using that story when we talked about creepy things at Halloween, and I never told my parents or mates. When I first spoke about it, it was with a paranormal lover friend who convinced me that he was a ghost, which I now doubt. Also, I told it to the cousin of the son of our family's friends, who lives close to the woods, and he told me that he used to see a weird hood guy too, staring at his windows when he was 8. He also offered the paranormal explanation. A month or so ago, I'm 20 years old now, I was with my boyfriend in the car, going to his house for the first time. He lives in a town that's very close to the one where we used to stay, where I saw the hoodie guy. He knows a lot of country-like roads, so he started going through one into the woods. At one corner, while driving, he told me, "What, a creepy guy? Do you imagine that he starts to follow us?" and laughed. Then I turned around, looking at who he was talking about, and I saw him. The same silhouette with the same hood. He didn't stare at me this time, and I don't really know if it was really the same guy, but he definitely had the same body and gave me the same shivers. Now I always ask him to take me the other way, and avoid sleeping alone. I've been more than 3 years without a single hallucination, and I didn't really realize we were in a town that close to where it happened until we got home. I know it's really hard to believe it was the same guy, but in the moment it really felt like it was. So much I started to cry and shake. He never followed my cousin or I. It only happened the one time, but I would never accept to go in the woods at night again, and I still fear camping just in case he shows up. It was totally a casual encounter, but his looks and the way he stared, it's nightmare fuel for me.
Charlie by Pansexual Swan Queen. When I was a little kid, I had a lot of bad luck with creepy people, especially around my best friend. Most of my worst childhood experiences happened when I was with her, and on the various trips we took together. But these stories are actually from another time. First, let me set the scene for you. My best friend moved away from our hometown in Virginia to Alabama when we were in the 2nd grade. However, we were determined to stay in contact, so we called each other almost every night and sent letters back and forth and drove our parents crazy with questions like when would we be able to see each other in person again. Eventually, both our sets of parents agreed to send me for a few weeks in the summer down to Alabama. My dad drove me down to Tennessee, where my friend and her father met me, and then drove me up to Alabama. Her parents weren't home often because they both worked, so they left me and my friend and my little brother in the care of a babysitter. She was basically a nanny with how often she cared for all of us, but we didn't mind. In our minds, she was the pinnacle of coolness. She was in her early 20s with long blonde hair and a slender build, and a slow southern drawl. I don't remember her name, but I think it was something like Callie. One day, Callie took the 3 of us to the Air and Space Museum. I remember it all. It was a scorching hot day. The kind of day that made most people want to stay home in their air conditioning or at least take a dip in a pool. So naturally, us being 3 of the young children, we complained almost the entire time until Callie agreed to make a stop at the Sonic on our way home. Only under the condition that we had to eat outside, as she didn't want any food in her own car. Now, I'm not sure if all Sonics look like this, because there are no Sonics in my area. But there was this little outdoor eating area covered in shade, and a drive-thru set up on the side of the building. Callie dropped us off on the indoor section to claim a table, while she went through the drive-thru to get the order. This place was basically abandoned, I guess because no one wanted to eat outside in such hot weather. Except for one man. Just by looking at this man, it was pretty easy to tell that he was homeless. His clothes were rather dirty and ill-fitting, he was scrawny, and had a scraggly-looking beard that was the color of rust, with tinges of white here and there. He was sitting on a table next to us, sipping on a drink. I didn't give the man much thought at first, as me and my friend chatted away, but he obviously noticed us. I was shocked when he approached us and tried to start conversation. It was so sudden, I had no idea how to respond, but I did not suspect anything bad. I was the type of 8-year-old who thought of adults as people who were always right. And it's not good to question one. Plus, I was really shy. My friend, however, was a, social butterfly, and did most of the talking for us. While he spoke to us, I noticed a few things. He seemed rather jumpy. His eyes were wide and occasionally scanning the area, as if he was nervous. It almost made me think he was scared for us, or of us, for some reason. Secondly, his attention was on me and my friend, completely ignoring her brother. While I had some of his attention, my friend had even more. I should explain here that my friend hit puberty a little bit earlier than I did, and, looked a lot older than a lot of our peers. She was also more developed than I was, but she was still adverse to wearing a bra, even though she probably needed one. You can probably guess where his eyes were glued to. Finally, Callie had gotten the food and parked the car and made her way back to us. As soon as she spotted us, she practically came running and stood between us and this man. She handed us our food and politely, but aggressively, asked the man who he was. I didn't understand at the time why friendly Callie was so weird and less than her cheery self, and it scared me. The man introduced himself as Charlie. He tried to strike up conversation with Callie. I don't remember his exact words, but I do remember feeling uncomfortable at what he was saying to her. It was far more blunt and flirtatious than it was when he was talking to us. But again, being so young, I didn't really understand it. Whatever he said must have freaked Callie out, because she quickly begun to herd us into the car and then whispered, "We're eating in the car, no questions." We're all confused, but we quickly made our way over to the car. Charlie, however, followed us up the entire way, getting more and more aggressive. And he only got more aggressive the more Callie tried to end the conversation. At this point, we finally realized whatever was happening wasn't good. So we were rushed and we got inside the car. Charlie actually made a grab for Callie, but she got into the car before he could and quickly slammed and locked the door. What happened next is the clearest portion of my memory for me. Charlie grabbed onto the door handle and pulled hard. The entire time he had this wide grin on his face. Even remembering it now, it sends chills down my spine. When the door wouldn't open when he lifted the handle, and then when he tapped the finger on the glass, pointing down to the door, silently asking for Callie to open it. Callie freaked, started the car and backed it up while she was still hanging onto the door handle. She attempted to run over his foot. And that's when he finally let go. She drove away frantically and called her boyfriend in the car while we kids ate our food in confusion. She told my friend's parents what happened, who in turn told my parents. I don't know if the police are contacted. It's been over a decade since this happened. The last thing I heard about Callie was that she married her boyfriend a few years after the incident. Wherever she is, I'll be forever grateful for how protective she was over us. And Charlie, that's your real name. Let's not meet again.
Rescued my dog from some creeps just in time. By Peach25. I used to own the most sweetest-natured, loving and loyal golden retriever who loved nothing more than people and food. About 2 years ago, we were both walking back from a long dog walk through the woods on the outskirt of the town where I live. On the edge of these woods is a large housing estate that has a bit of a bad reputation, and a supermarket that I was going to stop off at on our way home. To get to the supermarket, we had to walk through this path that's quite isolated, and then underneath an underpass. Along the way, there were a few discarded McDonald's food wrappers that my dog tried to get at, being a typical retriever. We got to the supermarket, and I left him in a shaded area outside. Now, I have done this countless times in the 10 years I've owned my dog, and I've never had an issue. I took his lead off and took that inside with me. I always did this as my reasoning was that no one would be able to drag him away if he didn't have a lead on. I bought 1 or 2 things inside the store, so I was gone maybe 5 minutes or so. As I was paying, I just had this gut-wrenching feeling that I had to get out and go as something was wrong. I literally ran out of the store and found that my dog was gone. The car park was pretty empty, and it was a boiling hot day out, so there was nobody around to ask if they had seen him. As this supermarket was on top of a hill, I had a pretty good viewpoint, and I saw a flash of gold that I knew was him moving through the path toward the woods that we had walked through earlier. I ran after him, thinking he had gone back to eat the food wrappers that he had sniffed at earlier, so at this point, I wasn't panicked as much. I got to the food wrappers and there was no sign of him. That's where the panic set in. I started screaming his name, and I could hear his panicked howling and barking coming from the underpath that led to the path to the woods. I started running and reached the entrance to the woods. There, in the middle of a clearing, was my dog, with a rope around his neck. Surrounding him was about 5 or 6 teenagers who looked like trouble, all male, and about 15 or 16 years old. 2 of these little punks had their smartphones in their hands filming him. Another one had what looked like an aerosol can and a lighter. Another one had some sort of sharp object. They were all around laughing and yelling and cheering him on as one of the kids was prodding him with a metal pole. I started yelling and screaming at them to give me my dog back, and that took them by surprise, so my dog managed to break free and run towards me. I dread to think what these creeps were planning to do with him. Being a short female, I wasn't going to stick around and see what happened next, so I grabbed my dog and we both ran. I've never forgiven myself for allowing that to happen to my dog, so don't make the same mistakes I've made, and never leave your dog unattended, no matter how quick you think you are going to be.
Turn the flash off. It's probably much easier to stalk people that way. By Jackal of All Trades. This is my very first time posting on Let's Not Meet, though I've been an avid reader of the stories posted on this website. The story I'm going to share is still going on, and I apologize if it's a bit too long. So to start off, I'll give a little background information. I live in a neighborhood with an area full of quaint little eateries and other small shops, just a 30-minute walk from my house. On this particular day, my friend and I had just returned from the beach, and we were both starving. My mom, who had driven us there, along with my siblings and friend's sister, said that if we were hungry, she'd give us some money and drop us off at one of the small restaurants. After we were done, she'd drive herself and my siblings back to my house for a sleepover. She was too tired to wait around for us to order some food, and didn't mind us walking back in the dark since our neighborhood was relatively safe. After she dropped us off and sped away, my friend decided to order a sandwich, and I ordered one for myself as well. We were both still damp from the ocean and covered in sand, so I was literally itching to return home and take a shower. The sandwich place was just closing since it was 10 and very dark, so we immediately began walking back once our orders were finished. The walk from the little area full of shops to my house is pretty straightforward. You walk uphill until you hit an intersection, then you turn right and begin walking downhill. So sandwiches in hand, my friend and I began the walk. I was practically hobbling since my knees were bruised to hell after being tossed about by the violent waves. It was super dark, and the sky was almost an oily black with no moon in sight. We weren't nervous and talked about random things as we went. At the corner of the intersection, there's an old and rather run-down house that's fenced off by a huge hedge. The hedge is mostly solid except for a couple sections that were cut out of it and led to the house's front door. The owner of the house is an old and stout woman who loves sitting on her lawn chair, smoking cigarettes, and grimacing every time I give her a friendly wave. In the darkness, the hedge was a solid mass of black leaves and very difficult to see through. My friend and I rounded the corner, and were about to begin the easier downhill walk, when there was a bright flashing light, as if someone had blinked a flashlight on and off again at us or something. We were dumbfounded, and paused to look around in confusion. My friend laughed nervously and said, That was weird. Maybe it was a street lamp or something. I was still looking around warily when there was another flash. This time I saw where it had come from. There was a figure. From the shape of the shoulders and chest, I assumed it was a man, who was clothed entirely in black and held a camera in his gloved hands. The flash illuminated his grungy old hoodie and dirty jeans. He was crouching in one of the cut-out sections of the hedge, and pointing the camera straight at my face as I turned to look. My heart just about stopped. What the actual fuck was a man doing crouched in the darkness and taking pictures of my friend and I with the flash on? I quickly turned back and elbowed my friend, mumbling something along the lines of, "Keep walking, dude. Just keep walking." We sped up, my friend facing forward whilst I kept turning to glance over my shoulder. The man in the hedge rose to his feet, and when we were about 10 feet away from him, he began taking long strides towards us, hands now jammed into the pockets of his black hoodie. My mouth was dry and my stomach was twisted into knots as I began to walk faster and faster. This shit was something I'd expect to read about on Let's Not Meet, but never experience for myself. I felt totally unprepared, especially since my friend was with me and didn't even know there was a man following us. We were half running at this point, which was killing my bruised knees. Every step began to burn, but we continued walking downhill at an ever-increasing speed. Every time I looked back, the creep was closer and closer to us, making almost no sound and never faltering in his stride. My house is on a lot with a couple of others, the whole lot surrounded by an iron fence with an unlocked gate at the front, facing the street. We bolted the gate and slammed it shut, and my friend went to open the door of my house as I stood next to the gate and peered out at the street. He was gone. When we were finally inside eating our sandwiches, I told my friend about the man, and that he'd been taking pictures of us as we rounded the corner. We were both rather freaked out, my friend saying that my constant looking over my shoulder had put them on edge. I mentioned it to my mom, but she blew it off and we went on to have our sleepover like nothing had happened. The next night I was home alone, waiting for my mom and siblings to return from the movies. There's a large window that faces the street in the room where I was sitting on the couch, and the blinds weren't drawn yet since I'm a bit of a lazy bastard. So I was sitting in front of this window and eating dinner, whilst I played Skyrim on the PS3. A pretty average night if I'm being honest. And the volume was turned way up since I was home alone, and there was no one around to complain. From the corner of my eye, I see movement. It's dark again, being almost 10:30. So I tell myself it was probably a cat or something, and go back to playing. And then there's a flash from somewhere near the fence. My blood runs cold as fucking ice. I'm sitting there in my robe, and some motherfucker is taking pictures of me? Hell fucking no. I yank the blinds closed, and not wanting to go outside and investigate, continue to play Skyrim. The doors were all locked, and I figured I could just wait for my mom to arrive home. That was yesterday. Now it's about 11 o'clock and I'm in my upstairs bedroom, which has a huge window that also faces the street. I was lying in my bed, listening to some quiet music while I closed my eyes and tried to relax. My curtains were open, not all the way, but enough so that my bed was visible from the ground. It is almost completely silent, until I hear the gate swing open. The glass of my windows is super thin. I turn off the music, crunching leaves, which means someone is walking over towards my house. I assume at this point it's one of the other people who live on my lot. The crunching stops right below my window. I'm a bit warier now, and to be honest, a little nervous after the previous events. Wanting to go close the curtains, I sit up a bit in my bed in order to reach them, when there's another flash coming from right below my fucking window. Oh hell no. I yanked the curtains closed and jumped back in bed, feeling sick and panicked. And the crunching leaves receded, and I heard footsteps walk away from my house back down the street. And that was about 10 minutes ago. Something is going on. I've never been in this situation before, but based on the past events, I think there might be someone stalking and taking photos of me. If something else happens, I'll post again, but hope that I don't have to.
Never Walk Home Alone at Night by The Soul of Age. So this was around late 2010, early 2011. I was 15 at the time, and I was spending the weekend at my best friend's house. Her name was Talia, and I was also hanging out with my two other friends, Jade and Shwana. They were there too. Our friend Jack lived across the town, and he wanted us to come over and hang out. It was around a 10 to 12 minute walk to get there, but it was 9 p.m. and Saturday night, and Talia was skeptical about walking across town in the first place, so she stayed behind. But the rest of us figured that there was 3 of us walking and we'd be safe, and we were. So we got to Jack's house, and he'd been drinking out of his mother's liquor cabinet. He was 17 at the time, and 2 acquaintances of ours, who were dating each other and having problems in their relationship, were there drinking too. It was annoying for me to be there since none of us wanted to drink, and one of the acquaintances was a drunkenly, spilling her life story to me and how she wanted to break up with her boyfriend because she was in love with her ex, yada yada yada, stupid basic bitch shit. Basically shit I didn't care about. I barely knew this person, but I listened and tried to help her through her drunken banter while we were there. So 11:30 hits, and Jade, Shwana, decided to call Tally's mom, who treated us like her own children, to come pick us up because, of course, no one wanted to walk home at almost midnight, even with there being 3 of us. The drunk girl didn't want me to leave, so I felt bad and stayed behind, and told Jade and Shwana that I'll meet her later on. I didn't have the concept of fear like they did. I was, according to rumors at school, one of the most intimidating girls in our class. Always carried a pocket knife on me, was going through my goth stage, etc, etc. I knew the town like the back of my hand, so I didn't think it was such a big deal. I finally leave, and this is where the actual creepy situation comes from. So I'm walking back across town to Tally's house by myself, texting Jade the whole time to make sure that she was still awake and could open the door for me. It was about 12:30 a.m. and I was walking fairly fast, almost jogging because I had a bad feeling about being out by myself, so I kept up pace. I made it to Main Street in town, and Tally's house was a good 2 to 3 blocks away. A straight shot. I had to look both ways before I crossed Main Street, and there was a car coming from the right in the distance, driving about 45 miles an hour. So I bolted across the street before the car came up, and as soon as I did that, the car comes to a screeching halt and whips itself into the road that I was walking on. Luckily, I heard the screeching tires and my instincts kicked in, so I darted into the bushes in front of someone's house because my brain quickly comprehended that something didn't seem right about this car. Not to mention curfew and cops. Driving so fast down the road, speed limit being 25 miles, there's no way this was legitimate. At least at this time of night. Then, making a quick turn out of nowhere, like Jesus. I stayed crouched in the bushes. They were thick bushes, like I said, and I was going through my goth phase, so I was wearing all black, and I had the night to my advantage. And I watched this car slowly creep down the road next to the house I was hiding outside of. Almost like the people inside the car were looking for something. It doesn't necessarily have to be me, but the people inside were not the most worthy people. They kinda looked like they came from a more ghetto sort. I held my breath, and I watched it continue down the road and turn down a parking lot, and I watched it head up Main Street once again. As soon as that car got to a stop sign opposite for where I was going, I bolted. I never ran so fast in my life. All the while, I was texting Jade with my difficult-to-use flip phone, texting her, "Open the damn door now." Everything was like it was on cue. I make it to the front steps of Tally's house, and as soon as I got to the first step, Jade opens the door, and that same car comes flying down the road I was on, hitting the gas, reviving the engine, and passing the house, almost as if the person/people in the car were mad. Jade sees me out of breath and barging into the house. She started asking me all these questions, and, well, I soon locked the door and told her everything. Next morning, I told Tally and Tally's mom about what happened, and Tally's mom went white. Apparently, a man had been caught a few towns away from ours, stalking and assaulting another woman. And around the same late hours of night, she pulled a news report out on her phone and I read it, and the car description was the same as the one in the news report. I do apologize for the long story, but I'm 21 now, I own a gun, and I'm thinking about this, and it still gives me shivers to this day. I can only imagine what could have happened if I didn't go with my gut that night. So, creepy guy, who likes to stalk, harm, and possibly rape women. Let's not meet again.
He Tried to Break In by Bastardino. So, about a year ago, my parents and I were offered to stay a week in my friend's cottage in northern Michigan. Of course, we accepted the offer and packed up our things and brought our Great Dane with us. About 5 days into the stay, my parents went a few towns away to hit some bars and have some fun. I didn't mind because I liked being alone a lot of the time. At about 12:30, my parents weren't home yet and my dog started flipping out. He was running all over the house, growling and barking. Naturally, I was scared out of my mind. I grabbed my pocket knife and barricaded the bedroom door. For about 10 minutes, my dog continuously barked. When my dog finally stops barking, I get a call from my parents. They say they're too drunk to drive home and are going to stay at a nearby motel. I don't get a minute of sleep that night. And when I do decide it's safe enough to get up, I notice something that chilled me to the bone. The screens to my bedroom windows were cut. I bursted out of my room and see that every screen in the cottage is cut. What I think happened is that some creep decided to break into the cottage through the doors originally. And since I am careful about security, I made sure they were locked. After the creep was unsuccessful with the doors, he cut the screens and tried to get into the windows. It had been a hot night that night, so before my parents left, they turned on the AC and I locked the windows. I assumed that he made some sort of noise that woke up my dog, causing my dog to freak out. And then the creep must have left. I called my parents, and then called the cops. The cops didn't find any trace of the guy, and as soon as they were done with the investigation, my family and I were out of there. So, to the guy who tried to break into the cottage my family was staying in, let's not meet.
Never add anyone you don't know. Please teach your kids stranger danger, people. By Nut Ayak. I have been reading the subreddit for a few days now. I have a couple of stories I wanted to share that I think I've been blocking out of my mind for a while now. I'm not the best writer, and I'm on mobile, so I apologize for any grammar and spelling mistakes. Here we go. Story number 1. Just put this into context. I'm currently a 21-year-old female living in a fairly small town in Canada. Approximately 1,600 people reside here, and a whole lot of shocking news does not happen. This story happened when I was 13 years old, back in the days of MSN. My dad had just recently put a huge boxy computer in my room. Right away, I downloaded MSN, as that's what everyone was using to communicate at school with. Every day, after school, I'd hop online, chat with my friends and whomever I had a crush on that week, all while playing stupid Flash computer games. After about 6 months of having this computer in my room, some unknown person wanted to add me on MSN. I accepted, and she told me that she was a 14-year-old. We chatted for a few days, started telling each other, and then she told me that she started getting bullied by her friends about her breast size, because they were small. I was trying to tell her that that doesn't matter and that they were just jealous or whatever 13-year-old excuse I could make. She asked me if I could, well, look at a few pictures for her and then tell her what I thought. By now, I was thinking that this was weird, but I said sure. Send them my way. She then asked if she could ask for one of mine for comparison. I was trying to tell her no, but then I thought, why not? I know I'm a bit naive. I sent her one and she gushes about mine and how pretty I am, etc, etc, etc. Then she starts asking me for more, but of different parts of the body. I finally put down my foot, told her no, and that's when she started getting mad and started calling me names, telling me that she was going to send me viruses if I don't. I just blocked her and forgot about it. I started thinking that it could have possibly been a pedophile on the other line doing this. A week later, I got another request from a different email. I accept right away. They start telling me to go on cam. I tell them no, I don't want to. Then they say what they want me to do on cam. Sexual stuff. That if I don't, they're gonna send me viruses, and well, if I block them again, that, they'll do things. I once again blocked them, and an hour later, I got an email saying that they know I blocked them, and if I don't unblock them, they'll destroy my computer. I'm freaking out at this point. I don't tell anyone because I don't want to get in trouble, and get my computer privileges taken away. I had a weekend sleepover at a friend's house that night, and I go ahead and try to forget about it. I don't go on a computer for a whole month. When I finally do, there's no viruses, thankfully. I never accepted another email that I didn't know, and everything was fine until I got my first phone. Maybe about 7 months into having my phone, I got a text from a random number. It's a girl saying that they're asking me for help. They just got out of the hospital from being there for a few months. She got ran over by a car. This wouldn't be the hospital here because it was only an emergency room. If you have to stay at a hospital, you'd be in the next town over. She said her boyfriend was being mean and wouldn't pick her up. Then she started talking about her boobs, and right away I knew who this person was. Saying her friends were making fun of her because they were so small and the same old shtick. I told them I remember who they were and to fuck off. They started getting mad and threatening me and saying that they know where I live and everything. How did they even get my number? I don't know. I don't have it on Facebook. I should have told someone, but once again, I didn't want to get into trouble for whatever reason. I'm very timid, you can raise your voice, and at the slightest I will cry. So once again, I ignored them until they finally gave up. Fast forward to when I was 19. I moved out of this small shitty apartment and with my boyfriend and friend. We were having a get-together with all of our friends, brought some booze, some drugs, and played board games. At 11 p.m. or so, I get a text from an unknown number saying, "Hey, I still kept the same number, just a different phone." They sent me a picture, the same picture I sent them when I was 13. They kept all of these for years. By now, I'm livid and say, "Listen, fuckwad. When I send that photo, I was underage. So if you are in fact a pedophile, then you have a photo of someone who is underage, and I have your phone number, and I also have a cop who lives a couple of houses down. I'm going to bring him this information, and they will trace it back to your disgusting ass." I never got a response back. And once again, I ended up changing my number. A year later, of course, but still I hadn't heard of him since. In hindsight, I probably should have went to the cops a long time ago. Who knows what they have done this to, or who they've done it, or what kinds of things they have done in the past. I never go to the cops because I just wanted it to be over with. I never told anyone my story until last year when I told my delusional, deranged, and manipulative ex who was accusing me of cheating and sending nudes to people. I haven't sent any nudes since the first incident, and I will probably never send anyone anything. Doesn't matter how long I'm in a relationship for, it's definitely screwed me up. Story number 2. So this happened to me when I was 7, or so. I was walking back from school. Like I said, I lived in a small town, blah, 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 blah. My school was only 6 blocks away in a straight line. Just at the top of a small hill is our little hospital, and a block after that is my street. This day, my brother usually walks with me, but he was either homesick or hanging out with friends, so I had to walk home alone. As I was about 20 feet away from my house, about to turn up on my alley, a light tan car pulls up beside me. I wasn't aware of stranger danger and tried to avoid eye contact, but I could see him on my peripherals. He was just staring at me. I heard him call out, "Hey, sweetie! My puppy escaped from my yard and I was wondering if you'd seen him." I shook my head at him. I tried to say no and kept walking. I looked at him again and he looked to be maybe in his late 30s. He had dark brown shaggy hair and some stubble. His smile was creeping me out, so I looked away. Then he asked, "Would you mind helping me look for him? I know 2 sets of eyes are better than 1. That's when panic sunk in. I knew this was a bad situation. I told him that my parents were waiting for me, and I started booking it up the alley, getting in the house and slamming my door shut. And I locked it. I ran up, hid under my bed, hoping he didn't follow. He didn't, thankfully. I never told my parents. Yet again, I was worried about being in trouble, so I never mentioned it. A week later, I heard my parents talking about how some little girl got abducted into town about an hour away. I don't know if it was the same guy, but I got a gut feeling that it was. I knew I could just feel it in my gut. I still never told anyone about it, but I wish I did. Perhaps I could have saved this little girl, but I was too scared. I don't remember if she was found or not. I think she was, but in a town 5 hours away. Thanks for reading my stories. I enjoyed a subreddit. So please, creepy stalker guy, and weird puppy guy, let's not meet again. Never Trust a New Kid by Hoodified. Let me give you some background on the situation. My name is John, and I'm like 16 at the time of this event. In the middle of junior year, in fact. I'm from Asian descent, and I'm nearsighted, which means I can't see far away. Which is, you know, like a couple inches from my face, if you call that far away. It all started when I was in my homeroom. I'll call my teacher Mr. H. Now, Mr. H was a young woman in her 30s, but looked much older than she actually was. She taught history, and I had her in second period. First period just ended, and I'm just getting into class. I walk over to my seat, and I see this skinny, black-haired kid sitting there. "Are you the new kid?" I asked. "Yeah, name's Kyle." "Cool name. Mine's John. I don't want to seem rude, but you're in my seat. Could you please move?" He gave me a face, like a face that a child makes when you don't give them what they want. He sat up and took the seat behind me. He reeked at someone who hadn't showered in a while. I take my seat and class begins. Miss H explains the project that we have to do, and it's on famous landmarks and their purpose, and honestly, I couldn't even care then, let alone now. This was a partnered project, and lucky me, I got paired with Kyle. I thought not only was this going to give me a bad grade, but it meant that he had to come over to my house, or I had to go over to his house. Obviously, I didn't want someone coming over to my house, nor did I wish to go anywhere for that matter. So I made a stupid decision, and decided to give Kyle my phone number. Everything was alright for the first couple of days. Nothing was creepy, besides, well, the look he gave me a few days ago. Except for one afternoon, where me and him were finished writing. We both did 2 pages each, and we were going to pick out the highlights from them both and combine them together. This was a couple of hours ago. My parents were out for dinner, and I was at home alone playing some computer games. when I heard what sounded like glass shattering from the basement, which was odd because I was on the second floor and I shouldn't heard anything even if something shattered down there. Being the coward I am, I decided to pause my game and listen. Not sure what to expect, but I'm listening for a good 5 minutes before resuming my game. Another minute goes by, and I heard the door to the basement open. I didn't have any pets besides from a cat, and he was on my bed. I mute my computer, turn off the monitor, and then I grab my phone and dial 911. This was the landline installed in my room, which was my dad's office at the time. I quickly told the operator the situation, and she dispatched an officer. I hear silent footsteps on the stairs. It felt like forever, which was roughly 3 minutes, and then I hear sirens. I never felt so safe in my life. That was until my door slammed open. I couldn't see much, but only a mere silhouette of a figure. The sirens passed my window with enough light for me to see the face of Kyle. He doesn't notice me, but he hides in the closet panel parallel to me. I've never been so scared in my entire fucking life. His facial expression was the same from when I had told him to get out of my seat in class. It was roughly 30 seconds of utter darkness besides me and some streetlights. The doors slam open. The cops rush in, turn the light on, and ask me if I'm okay. I scream my fucking lungs out while trying to explain he's in the closet while sobbing. He opens the closet door and gets attacked immediately, but luckily he tased Kyle. I asked the cops why they arrived so fast only on suspicion, and he told me that the operator had heard another phone click earlier after I hung up. I handed in the project a week later because I took some time from school and stayed at my grandparents' house. I got an A. So, Kyle, let's never meet again. Everyone Has a Skeleton in Their Closet by JD2456. We all have skeletons in our closet. We have those things that we don't want people to find out. We all have those things that we don't want to remember, and we wish we could just put them away in a place where no one will be able to find it. However, you can't outrun your regrets and your troubles. They always have a way of catching up with you. Personally, I've grown tired of running from this regret of mine, so I believe it's about time I get everything off my chest. When I was in high school, like most, I had a good group of friends. There were only 5 of us, but we would always be hanging out. We were really good friends, and I thought it would last forever. We thought that it would anyway, but it ended up going a different way. We all went to different colleges, and even if we would hang out every now and again, we slowly begun drifting apart. Our group had dissolved by the time the first year of college had ended. We had also made new friends while at our respective colleges, and it was a lot easier hanging out with these people than it was to hang out with people in our group. Halfway through our senior year, however, we decided that we would do a little get-together so we could recreate how things were back in the day. I guess we were all feeling a little nostalgic. I had always wanted to go to, well, the way things were, the way they were in high school. Anyways, everything was a little awkward at first. It had been a few years since we all saw each other last. Everyone was there, and we ended up having a blast. And we decided to make it a weekly thing. We would all convene at predetermined locations at the same day of every week. The next week, it was the 5 of us, Nick, Ellen, James, Chris, and myself. We met up at a bowling alley. We thought it would be fun to do some bowling because, well, bowling is fun, and it's easy to do, and you can just pick up and play. Again, we had a great time, and we kept going on doing these weekly meetups. We'd been doing this for a good month or so, and at one point, Nick just stopped showing up. I heard that he'd gotten into doing some drugs, and his druggy friends kept putting pressure on him to hang out more often. I actually didn't like him much anyways. He was always so annoying, and he tried forcing his opinions on us, and they're always the controversial type of opinion. Despite Nick's disappearance, we continued to do these meetups. Although the atmosphere had gotten a little bit more awkward, we still had a really good time though. One thing I learned through these meetups is that out of all of us, Chris and Ellen were the only people who'd stayed in contact with each other. Apparently during high school they had gotten together. So we hung out a few more times. We'd gone to an arcade and hung out at some of our houses. One week we decided to play some video games at James' house. Everyone at this point who usually showed up there. Actually, I should probably scratch that. It wasn't everyone who usually showed up. It was everyone save for Chris. Ellen was just sitting there sobbing the entire time. Whenever I tried asking her about Chris, she wouldn't respond and just cried some more. Guess they broke up or something. They seemed to be a good couple, but I'm not too sad. I remember I had a crush on her, and Chris knew it, but he got together with her anyway. Well, after that, Ellen stopped showing up, so just James and me, and we went our separate ways shortly thereafter. James and I never saw eye to eye anyway. It's been about a few months since our group split up again, and I still can't get the smell of death coming from my closet to go away. I thought their bodies would have stopped decaying by now.